7.7% is the percentage gathered to represent aircraft business in Africa. Something, an objective that vision bearers are actually looking up to combat in order to boost sustainable development in the continent, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have Mr. Abderamane Berthe, who will actually enlighten us in this line, the Secretary General of the African Airlines Association. Welcome, Mr. Berthe.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for having me.
So please enlighten us on what exactly AFRA is.
AFRA is the African Airlines Association. We are based in Nairobi, Kenya since 1968. We are a trade membership organization. Currently we have 53 member airlines. We represent 85% of air traffic in Africa, our members. We also have partners. We have 35 industry partners like aircraft manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, are all companies working in the aviation business. And our vision is sustainable air transport in Africa, and also an interconnected continent, because connectivity is a challenge nowadays in Africa. And our role is to promote African airlines and champion the development of aviation industry in Africa.
Talking of membership, how do countries actually get into AFRA?
We have roughly 53 member airlines, as I said, from roughly 40 states around the continent, currently. Yeah.
So how exactly does AFRA promote intra-African trade? How do airlines in the African continent can actually break barriers to promote intra-African trade in order to sustain economic development?
You see, there are some flagship programs from African Union. The first one was launched in January 2018, which is the Single African Air Transport Market. We are directly concerned about it. And the same year in March was launched the African Continental Free Trade Area. And as you know, the Secretariat is in Accra, the AFCFTA Secretariat. We are already discussing with them to see how AFRA and AFCFTA can work together, because for us, trade, tourism, and air transport are linked. For that reason, last year in 2022, in June, in Nairobi, we convened what we call an air transport sustainability laboratory with all stakeholders, including tourism sector, trade sectors as well, and aviation sector, aviation, air navigation service providers, to discuss how we can make air transport more sustainable in Africa, and how we can work with the tourism sector and trade sectors as well. So we are currently discussing with AFCFTA to put in place a memorandum of understanding, because trade will help air transport to grow, and air transport also is an infrastructure which is needed to develop trade also in Africa. We know that African states are not trading among themselves enough. It's less than 20% currently. In other continents like Europe and Asia, it's above 50%. So this program of African Union is aimed to grow the level of trade among African countries, and air transport has to play a big role in that.
The Intra-African Trade 2023 actually summoned over 1,600 companies around Africa. So how exactly, what do you think are the major stakes of this great event that actually gathered all major enterprises here today, including air companies?
This is a very important thing, because as I said before, trade level being very low, it's very important to put together all the players for them to interact, to sign a contract to grow the intra-African trade. And air transport also has a big role to play in it. The challenge we have on air transport today in Africa is that the environment is high cost. So we need to bring costs down. And of course, we can talk also about safety. We need also to have a safe air transport. For that reason, we are signing here with African Bank a memorandum of understanding for the sustainable air transport in Africa. We have already started to work on two big projects with African. In fact, the first one is how to enhance safety within the continent, safety of our member airlines. So this project is aimed to assist our member airlines to get the best safety standard known in the industry. And the second project is about saving costs and reducing carbon CO2 emission of air transport. We had a workshop in Addis Ababa 10 days ago, which was supported by African regarding what we call the free routing airspace on the continent. It makes flights shorter. It makes airlines saving on fuel burns and also on maintenance of aircraft, because when the flight time is reduced, the maintenance cost also is reduced. So we are being supported by African on these two big projects already. So I think it's very important all the sectors to work together to make a conducive environment for the development of air transport in Africa, because air transport for me is a part of the economic development of the continent.
Definitely, we cannot do without air transport in the economic development of our country.
How can you travel from Johannesburg to Dakar by road?
That's impossible, definitely.
It's impossible.
But that actually brings us to financing. Does this partnership with African Bank actually leverage financing for most of these African companies who are still sinking in funds?
Yes, because the environment is very difficult for African Airlines, and they have been also impacted by the COVID-19, as you know. They are now recovering. I think by early 2024 we will reach the level of traffic we had before the COVID-19. However, we still have some challenges we had already before the COVID-19, and we need still to work on these challenges. We have a cost of operation which is high compared to other regions. For example, fuel cost is 30 to 40% higher in Africa than in other regions. We have also the challenge of what you call taxes. African governments are putting a lot of tax on air transport. When a passenger buy a ticket, 40% to 50% of the ticket is tax. It's not going to the airline, it's going to states. So as an industry, we are also working, advocating to reduce the level of taxes on air transport.
You have mentioned a number of challenges already that AFRA might be going through with most of its partners, but are there ongoing projects already to actually eradicate these barriers?
We have a project. As I said, we had the laboratory, Air Transport Sustainability Laboratory in Nairobi. We had 5 projects. 2 projects were about reducing taxes and charges on aviation. We had another project on the free routing airspace. I talked about it, which is supported by African Bank. We have another project on the single African air transport market, because connectivity is really an issue today in Africa. We want really to have a better connectivity. It means that we need to see states granting traffic rights to airline to operate, because if you don't have access to market, it's very difficult to grow. And the last one is how to cooperate between air transport sector, tourism, and trade sector. These are the 5 projects. We have a roadmap of it. We have a steering committee for the implementation of the roadmap.
Recently, we had Kenya and Rwanda who actually lift visa bans in order to access their company. What advantage to the aircraft business in Africa? Do you actually advise many other countries to pursue that line?
This is very great, and I've seen the latest trends in East Africa. leaving visa barriers in countries. I hope in Africa this will happen soon. You know, there is the third flagship project of African Union is the free movement of people. And this has to be achieved also because 2 years ago, 1 out of 2 Africans needed a visa before they start their flight. So this has to be really removed, and I'm sure we have many things to do at the same time. The visas and the high cost of operation, taxes and charges. We need to bring all this down to see air transport growing on the continent. Air transport is no more a luxury for African citizens. Okay. Only 10% of African citizens today can afford air transport.
Mr. Berthe, talking of air transport not being a luxury anymore, very few Africans today can actually afford plane tickets, even in their own region or in their own country, living from one town to the other. So what exactly can be done to actually facilitate transport, air transport and precising to most Africans?
Okay, you have high cost of operation, fares are also high. Apart from that, you have also the GDP per capita, which is very low in Africa. Do you know the GDP per capita in Africa is 10% of the average GDP per capita globally? So we need also to see African economies growing and African citizens being able to afford air tickets. So as I said, there are many things, states, stakeholders, African Airlines need to work hand on hand to make things happen.
So do you think it's a skills problem as well? Do we have the required skills as in the construction material, imports and exports of planes, and eventually the availability of good pilots?
Yes, of course, human resources for air transport is also an issue. And currently we are working among our stakeholders to train more pilots, more engineers. It's not easy because sometimes you can train pilots and because of favorable conditions, they can go to work in the Middle East or in other regions. So it's a challenge for African Airlines currently to train and retain the expertise within our airlines.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now draw curtains on this program, hoping that our airlines securities and the airplanes actually catch up with sustainable development in years to come. Thank you very much, Mr. Berthe, for accepting our invite on Africa 24.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for more programs on Africa 24.